All right, you found us here at Off Leash. Thanks for joining. We can now be found on Rumble and YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the audio podcasts. So check us out, share it with your friends and family. Look, right now there are emerging issues out of South America, tremendous emerging issues that are of great importance to the United States. This is something we've got to dig into. You don't want to miss this, talking about what's happening in South America. All right, Eric. So we've got down just in the Southern Hemisphere, Venezuela is north part of South America on the coast, and bordering it is Guyana. Am I saying that right?
Guyana.
Guyana. Yep. Let's start here. I understand there have been tremendous oil discoveries off the coast of Guyana over the last 3 years. Let's start with that. Tell us about that, and how has that created a tremendous dispute between the two countries?
Exxon did a big offshore exploration program, and they hit it very big with the Starbrook formations. They did it with Hess and with, I believe, CNOOC, a Chinese partner. Why it matters? It's the single largest new energy discovery in the entire Western Hemisphere. And Hess was just bought by Chevron. Why does that matter? Because Chevron has major fields and operations in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. There, as you probably know, Venezuela really lost any kind of representative democracy years ago with a socialist revolution of Hugo Chavez, and then when he died, Maduro takes over. And they've had lots of attempts at opposition and actually having a free election, and it's been suppressed, overturned, denied. And about 3 months ago, not even, the opposition parties in Venezuela got together and had a primary. The clear winner of that was Maria Corina Machado, a lady in her late 50s, professional engineer, I think mother of 3. She won with 90-some% of the vote. Cleaned house.
I don't know anything about her, but I know she must be a courageous woman.
Yes,
right?
Because the Venezuelans have been trying desperately to suppress her. She cannot leave the country. She cannot travel within the country. If she goes to stay at a hotel, the tax police come the next day and shut off the hotel, close it down. If she goes to a restaurant, they come the next day and shut down the restaurant. So it is, you talk about candidate suppression, voter suppression, it's going that in Venezuela.
And this is a primary for a general election.
For a general election because, right, so the Biden administration, because of the debacle in the Middle East and their desperate need to lower energy prices because of inflation, they decided to drop all these sanctions that they had against PDVSA, the national oil company of Venezuela. And in doing that, they got the Maduro regime to commit to some kind of an election in the future, sometime in 2024, probably in October.
Democracy
managed.
Right.
And so while they're suppressing this main opposition candidate, and I think that her success spooked the regime. And so what do? They dust off the old playbook of reignite a boundary dispute. And so the regime has announced on Sunday, December 2, they will have a referendum inside Venezuela about whether they should reclaim their land that is basically half of Guyana, their neighboring country to the east. You may remember Guyana from Jim Jones in the Kool-Aid days. He was a crazy cult leader that was from California. Go figure. And then he moved his cult to Guyana, and they committed mass suicide. 900 people died in 1978. So that's probably the only thing America's ever heard about from Guyana. Well, now, huge oil discovery, and the land that Venezuela is claiming, is where all the oil is. Guyana was the world's fastest growing economy last year because of the enormous oil revenue that they're seeing. And now you're seeing the bully socialist country backed by Russia and by Cuba and the Iranians.
China?
And some Chinese interests as well. they have an interest, but Exxon doesn't care who they have to pay royalties to. Chevron definitely is not going to stand against it because they have most of their equities in Venezuela, and the Chinese don't care either. So Guyana is in a very, very bad place, a very delicate place. They have effectively no military and no means to defend against whatever kind of incursion that the Venezuelans decide to do. So this vote that happens on Sunday, it's basically a mom and apple pie vote. Venezuelans are taught forever that they own everything west of the Essequibo River.
Right.
Again, half of Guyana. So
this is about nationalism. This is about national pride.
It's about
right?
Look. I see the gangster class running Venezuela is doing the same thing that the Argentine generals did in the Falklands. Right. They call it the Malvinas, and you had a terrible economy in Argentina back in the early 80s, massive unemployment, inflation, crazy. And so they picked a fight with Britain to claim this land. Britain, under very strong leadership of Lady Margaret Thatcher, smacked them and retook it. I don't know that there's anybody capable of smacking them back and doing something. And certainly it's another demonstration of the collapse of American deterrence and why it matters, because lots of countries have border disputes. But if they see Venezuela get away with it, and on current trajectory they will, you'll see cascading
encourage more
conflict all over the world for everybody settling scores with guns instead of diplomacy.
All right, so we've got, typical dispute is based on natural resources. This is not a new discovery. It's a recent discovery. So it's not like Venezuela woke up, yesterday and just read the news about this discovery. So your point is that politics is leading to this dispute, right?
The original dispute was from 1895 and settled in arbitration, and they accepted that. And then when Guyana got independence, there was some revisiting of that, but no changes. And now, 1 month after an opposition figure demonstrates real popularity in the country, they start a distraction.
So this must be
and I believe Venezuela, I'll be shocked if they don't do something, because taking that block of land and the ensuing oil deposits and the revenue that comes from it would be a 25 to a 30% increase in the Venezuelan GDP.
So it's a tremendous, massive oil reserve, clearly,
Yes.
right? All right, so play it out for me. The Venezuelans have their vote. It's going to pass by, wild margin.
Yep.
Then what?
Logistically, it's hard for them. They're not going to do they could, but there's no roads leading to that part of the Guyana territory. It's very thick jungle. But they can go by river, they can go by helicopter. Just in the last 2 weeks, they have been flying lots of military helicopter flights, Mi-17s, going and landing right on the border areas already, right up against Guyana territory, like 50 meters from it, as intimidation. Precursor.
Yeah.
And they had a number of jets, Sukhois, that they bought from the Russians, and they routinely fly over Guyana airspace and violate it and say, what are you going to do about it?
And Venezuela has probably got...
I even talked to a pilot that had flown in and out of all these small Guyana villages, doing support for people gold mining or whatever, or timber, and recalled being buzzed by Russian by Venezuelan jets routinely.
So Venezuela's military, let's talk about that for a moment. Because when you've got a dictatorial regime, clearly they've got to have a military backing them up to keep control of the populace, and then Maduro must keep control of that military. What do you know about the Venezuelan military? I mean, clearly there's no comparison to Guyana, right? They don't really have one.
The Venezuelans they can buy some stuff. They have a lot of numbers, but the jungle gets a vote, right? The terrain is very difficult, and I think the Venezuelan military is probably best at beating up its own population. It'd be interesting to see if they have the audacity to do, whether it's a unconventional invasion, and I would describe it as first they send some indigenous people, so-called, right? Whether it's soldiers dressed as indigenous people that flood into those areas, and they reestablish and they put up a flag and they say, this is Venezuelan territory, we're claiming this. And then if Guyana Defense Forces respond or do something, then Venezuela say, well, we have to go defend our people,
Right,
and they
right.
seize it that way. They'll slice the salami. They understand the Russians are helping them, the Iranians are helping them.
So
They will
there's a
find way.
justification at that point.
They create one out of thin air.
Right. And also enforce the outcome of the referendum, right, which is the people have spoken and they've reclaimed this disputed territory, which, by the way, is about half of the territory of Guyana.
It's about 60% of the landmass of Guyana.
Right.
Right.
Which is-
So it's very, to me, it's also similar to what Saddam did by claiming, Kuwait really should be part of Iraq. It was carved out of Iraq. Those are our lost provinces, and we're going to take it back.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the history there with the population of Guyana.
It's the only English-speaking country in all of South America, and it is that way because it was a kind of a UK trading colony, and so there was a kind of an Amerindian / black population, and then a lot of Indians, as in South Asian Indians, that were brought there as workers and accountants and all the rest, and so you have basically a split population along political lines as well between the indigenous versus the South Asian Indians that clash politically.
So-
and actually, the president is a Muslim, an Indian origin Muslim.
Okay. And so for them to have this impact on their GDP, it must be phenomenal. Are they investing in infrastructure or do we not know?
I think this last year was their first big revenue year, and I still think they're still trying to figure that out. But it's man, if they don't spend something to defend themselves, they will lose it all. And their big bully neighbor is going to just take it from them, and no amount of international court of arbitration and whining in foreign capitals is going to make a difference. This is a clear case of military victories driving diplomatic breakthroughs.
So, and for multinational corporations such as Chevron, doesn't matter, right? They want the lease. Doesn't matter who they get the lease from.
They're not going
Correct?
to really weigh in. No, and it's not like I don't think they're going to get U.S. Southcom forces to show up and enforce a border dispute, despite noise that they might make. I don't see Biden deploying forces to defend Guyana.
But this is incredible. I mean, this could really shake up the region if you got a Venezuela on the rise with new resources. Yes.
Again, this would bump up their GDP by 25 to 30%. So yeah, it is not a ruse, but it's an aggressive tactic done by the regime to try to keep themselves in power and beat off any opposition candidates from actually challenging them. The last time they had any kind of real election in 2014 in Venezuela, it was stolen. I mean, the opposition candidate clearly won, and the government just overturned the election. There was millions of people in the streets, and then nothing happened.
Right. Yeah.
I would anticipate something similar if they have elections, some kind of plebiscite, and people vote, and they'll just steal it, or they will arrest or kill or whatever the Maria Corina Machado,
But
who is a brave patriot who's trying to do better for her country.
Clearly, and there's nothing that could change their economy like this. Nothing. I mean,
No.
they've been ravaged by socialist policies for decades now, right?
Yes, and having the proper Western companies that are in there managing and now starting to harvest significant amounts of crude is a easy and lucrative win for the Venezuelan government.
Incredible. Look, U.S. interests are always at play here. That's what we're going to focus on next. Coming right up. We'll be right back.
Imagine a technology company built to restore your privacy, not take it away. You and your phone are constantly bombarded with tracking, surveillance, propaganda, and digital attacks. Even big tech companies claiming to protect privacy create their own backdoors. Unplugged restores what's been lost, starting with a messenger, a VPN, a mobile antivirus. The Unplugged app bundle gives you back what's rightfully yours. Unplugged. Restore your privacy.
Hey, we're back with Off Leash with Eric Prince, thanks for coming back to us. We're talking about U.S. interests now in South America. All right, so you gave us a great overview of what's happening.
Depressing
in this
overview.
dispute. Yeah, it's very depressing because Venezuela could get away with it and just take a huge leap economically.
And putting more resources in the hands of hardcore Bolshevik socialists is bad, because they sprinkle a lot of money around the rest of South America promoting super leftist candidates and policies. I mean, now you have the president of Colombia, used to be the head of effectively the Colombian Communist Party, aided by Venezuelan money. So putting more money in the hands of Maduro and the Maduro gang is really bad for America. It's bad. I mean, we've had a massive ongoing exodus of Venezuelan refugees trying to come to America because of really bad governance.
And there are people, you told us recently, from the Middle East transiting through Venezuela to get up through the U.S., correct?
By the thousands.
By the thousands. Coming from where?
Military-age males coming from Iran that come to Venezuela, pick up Venezuelan docks, and make their way north up the rat lines of the cartel smuggling.
Incredible.
Settling in major American cities and standing by for a call from Tehran to activate.
Unbelievable. All right, so let's discuss the U.S. interest here. So is this a situation with the Biden administration similar to what happened with Biden lifting the sanctions on Iran, which basically empowered them, got them back in the oil business? Is this a similar situation where Venezuela's had sort of the handcuffs taken off of them?
It's even worse, because with all the bans and the prohibitions that the Biden administration has put on developing hydrocarbons in America on all these federal lands, no more leases, no more drilling, no more exploration. You got to look for it somewhere. Guyana, perfect, in the water, develop it there, ship it to America. At least it's a close transit in its Western Hemisphere. Now we're letting a socialist, Marxist bully will likely take a big chunk of Guyana, and the problems will cascade and compound from there.
All right, so because we virtually shut down American energy production on Joe Biden's first day in office, it forced us to have to acquire our oil resources elsewhere, including of all places, Venezuela. Then you've got this discovery in Guyana. Now Venezuela is using this excuse for political purposes, right, to try to take back those resources through the supposed border dispute. Wouldn't an American president look at this situation and say, you know what, we are going to be Guyana's ally like they've never had an ally, and we are going to defend that resource, and then we're going to benefit from it, correct?
A bit of a stitch in time saves nine, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, and a tiny bit of gunboat diplomacy would be well to keep the Venezuelans on their side of the line. Look, Guyana is a population of 800,000 people, and I think their oil revenue to the country was $1.6 billion first years, and it's set to go up, compounding over the next few years as production doubles and then triples. So it's a huge win for a small country, and they're about to have it taken from them.
And it should transform their society in a positive way, which is only positive for U.S. interests.
Correct.
All right, let me read this clip from a story. The leadership from the United States Army 1st Security Force Assistance Brigade, whatever the hell that is, and the Guyana Defense Force met November 27th through 28th as part of the United States and Guyana's strong military-to-military partnership. So how is that going to benefit Guyana in this dispute with Venezuela? And what does that mean? Interpret that for me.
That means that they're there to talk about some future training endeavor where they'll maybe send a dozen or more U.S. trainers to do some training with the Guyana military for a few weeks and then leave. It doesn't give them surveillance. It doesn't give them helicopter or rotary. It doesn't give them maritime capability to actually project power and defend their territory from a Venezuelan onslaught.
But Guyana's in crisis, correct? I mean, this is a major national crisis for them, correct? Is it that level already?
It is the national crisis of the century for them.
Right.
Right. I mean, look, you have no doubt the Cubans, the Russians are pushing this. Cuba was a a dependent on the Soviet Union for really from the Cuban Revolution '62 till the Soviet Union collapsed. No more stipend from them. So what did Cuba do? They went and found and attached themselves like a tick onto the Venezuelan host and used their communist intelligence apparatus. The Cubans have a very good intel service to adversely transform Venezuela into a socialist state. And looking for additional growth opportunities, I have no doubt that they've set their sights on Guyana now to do the same.
All right. So what can we expect out of the U.S. military? It's the Southern Command, correct?
Yes.
All right. Tell me about the Southern Command.
General Laura Richardson, and that's not typically a place they put, not a place you're expecting to do combat operations from. And so I think this flare-up will be yet another test of senior military leadership. Are they able to deter our enemies? Are they able to communicate credibly to behave themselves or suffer the consequences? I'm not optimistic.
What are our options? To protect U.S. interests, what should we be considering? Is it merely diplomatic? Is it wait and see?
Look, I think the simplest thing is to put all the sanctions back on Venezuela if they make any move towards any kind of Guyana territory.
What are the odds of that happening?
I'd say it's very low now because as they've turned off sanctions, there's been a deluge of hedge fund managers, New York people, and related Democrat donors in there making deals with the Maduro government for gold, for oil, for all the rest. So it is a massive payoff to political allies of the regime, of the Biden regime.
All right. So allies of the Biden regime have gotten basically a free license because the sanctions were lifted to go down and do deals.
Correct.
Doing deals with the devil, effectively.
And the Maduro people know exactly who to do deals with, for who will get the best attention of the Biden administration and all the people from I think it's called West Executive Consulting, which is where it's kind of the manpower pool for people in and out of the White House.
So if we take a look at what seems to be emerging, this picture about the family Biden business,
Yep.
the Biden family business, and I'm not saying they have direct interest in Venezuela, but certainly they got friends involved there now. It's hard to imagine they'll reapply sanctions.
Not even just the Biden family, but folks connected to the Democrat Party and the friendly hedge funds, et cetera, to go do the boondoggle. Look, Venezuela has enormous amount. It's probably the single country with the most oil, hydrocarbons proven in ground in the world. There's a reason it was called El Dorado, the city of gold, because in the days of the conquistadors, there's literally cities gleaming that have been lost to the jungles, but it's extraordinary wealth in the ground that has been just ravaged and damaged beyond compare by socialism.
If you were in a position to make such decisions, would you be supplying the Guyana Defense Forces? Would you be providing armaments from the U.S.? What does that look like?
They need armaments. They need the means to operate that equipment and to rapidly have a deterrent capability on the ground, in the air, and at sea, to up the transaction cost if the Venezuelans try something stupid.
So if we were wise, we would apply let's look ahead, right? This referendum passes in Venezuela. As you said, and you sort of anticipate, there's going to be some sort of incursions, based on some basic premise, right? Some false premise, and at that point, you would envision the appropriate U.S. response would be reapply sanctions, at least start to tighten them up
immediately,
instantly.
severe. Go right back to what it was.
Okay,
crank that down immediately. That may give them pause.
And then provide Guyana Defense Forces with supplies. Just supply them, military supplies that they could use, maybe
a few things. Some ability for mobility, some surveillance, so you can see who's making the incursion, and build and fortify some of those key towns. I would almost, I'm reminiscent of what the British Empire did in the Levant, and they built these Taggart forts, which are basically police stations that were little mini fortresses that could withstand an attack for a week. That's all you really need there, just enough to to make it harder for people to roll in and take over.
Well, we're talking about oil rigs, correct? There must be littered across the region.
It's all well offshore. So you need a means to protect that from any kind of maritime nonsense. And then you need the ability to actually control land and protect infiltration from the Venezuela side.
Okay, so this is offshore rigs off of Guyana, but the excuse for this supposed dispute over the territory. Explain this to me? If Venezuela is trying to take back this territory, but the rigs are offshore, connect those dots for me. How does Venezuela get the
rigs are within the EEZ of Guyana. The land that makes that area part of the EEZ is the land that is the Essequibo area that Venezuela intends to take back.
Okay. All right. So you've got offshore, you've got onshore.
Yes.
Oil.
All this oil has been offshore.
Okay. Let's talk history again a little bit from the U.S. perspective. We talked before we were taping on the Monroe Doctrine. Give me your thoughts about how this alters the Monroe Doctrine. If we have a failed response from the U.S.
It's the nail in the coffin of any kind of Monroe Doctrine. Look, James Monroe was president in like early 20s, 23, 24, put out to say, hey, what happens in the Western Hemisphere affects U.S. national security. So all you European powers, stay out. This is our area, and if this is allowed to go on, it's further indication that the Monroe Doctrine is completely dead.
What is your prediction?
My prediction is through a irregular warfare approach, there will be an incident created after this referendum, and they will bully, cajole, payoff politicians in Guyana to even take a fall, and they will eat this. There's so the arbitrage is so large that they're going to do something,
Okay.
and it will involve everything from money to full-on kinetic operations by the Venezuelan armed forces,
So
with Russian, Cuban advisors and Iranian.
And Iranian.
Yeah, there's a couple thousand Iranian troops in Venezuela now.
On what basis?
There's supposedly a joint production facility for some drones where they make the Shaheeds. There's even been talk of putting some medium or long-range Iranian missiles into Venezuela that could reach the United States.
So we've just big picture for a moment. We've got a war raging against Israel that they're fighting back against. We've got the Russia-Ukraine war carries on and will for some time. We expect. We've got obviously China, saber rattling constantly. We've got the crisis on our border that is basically self-inflicted.
A flood that is not stopped or reduced in any way, shape, or form.
Right, because there's no intent to stop it or reduce it. So add this on as a new crisis in our hemisphere. It's hard to imagine this administration being able to address it competently. Am I right? It's not a good outlook, right?
Nope, and it's one more. I feel bad for the policymakers that are at the NSC or Secretary of State level, because it seems like they're not very able to play the cards dealt that they could play, or they're afraid to play, and so they get. The United States and our interests are going to be embarrassed badly again.
Soon. Very soon.
Like I've said this since 2021. This feels like a second Carter administration, where we just got our asses kicked as America all over the world. Inflation and
interest rates
and interest rates and real foreign policy setbacks everywhere.
Yeah, that's put us back years and years. Incredible. Thanks for the analysis. But there's more to come in South America. Let's focus on Argentina and the election of a new president there when we come back right after this on Off Leash.
Imagine a technology company built to restore your privacy, not take it away. You and your phone are constantly bombarded with tracking, surveillance, propaganda, and digital attacks. Even big tech companies claiming to protect privacy create their own backdoors. Unplugged restores what's been lost, starting with a messenger, a VPN, a mobile antivirus. The Unplugged app bundle gives you back what's rightfully yours. Unplugged, restore your privacy.
We are off leash. Thanks for coming back to us. We're talking about South America with an amazing discussion around this dispute between Venezuela and Guyana. There's other news in South America, Eric, with the election of a libertarian.
Fantastic news. A fantastic, strong, fierce libertarian, Milei, has been elected by 12 points, the president of Argentina. A guy who, well, he's an economics professor, libertarian, rock and roll frontman. He's the vocalist for a Rolling Stone cover band.
A badass.
Yeah, and he won, and he was just so pissed off at the political establishment. He started his own political party, and he won. He won big time. And he was just so sick of, look, after World War II, Argentina was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, at a per capita wealth equivalent to Switzerland. And then socialism by this idiot named Perón literally drove them off the cliff in a despair of inflation, unemployment, crime.
Don't cry for me, Argentina.
He said enough. And to see Milei and some of the press events he's done, where he's got a big board, a dry erase board with all the federal agencies he's going to close, all the same kind of nonsense that the left pushes here.
Right.
He is targeting those agencies, and
the Department of Culture.
I hope to God that he is successful at even 10% of what he goes after. If he is, my God, Argentina is the place to invest.
So this guy is pretty fascinating to watch, especially for those who are not familiar with his background. But he's a hardcore libertarian economist, and he brings a chainsaw.
Brings a chainsaw to a political rally,
right,
talking about what he wants to do to the bureaucracy. He goes, your days, you political elites that sit in Buenos Aires and enrich yourselves and do nothing but soak off of us, it's over. It's over, political elites, you're done. God bless him. I hope he does well.
You know, visual messaging is the most powerful. And the thing I think about when I was watching this chainsaw, I'm thinking about, a chainsaw doesn't cut. A chainsaw tears. It rips and tears.
It does. I cut my knee once with a chainsaw. I can definitely second that emotion.
This guy is a true badass. This guy says the left is shit. Word for word on broadcast network TV.
Yes.
And he's, this interview he's doing with this network, host, she's just stunned because he goes, like, the image of him is amazing. He's got these big lamb chop, sideburns.
With a big rock and roll hairdo.
Big hairdo. He's a radical. He's crazy. He looks like a crazy man. But that's what
they need.
They need.
Yes.
Is something unequivocal, something unflinching.
Something absolute that will correct the chronic wrongs that the average person in Argentina has been facing because of a political elite that's out to enrich themselves.
He has called for the elimination of their federal bank.
Central bank, yes.
Their central bank, right?
Because they print money like crazy. He might even try to dollarize the economy to put some fiscal restraint on the country because people's assets aren't worth anything because it just gets inflated away.
And after his election, he said that the elimination of their central bank is not negotiable.
Correct.
There's no discussion. It's gone. And he's got the votes to back it up.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There was first a three-way primary, and no one, actually, the socialist minister who was running on the left side won the most votes, but not Milei, but because Milei's votes were split with another conservative party, but those other so-called conservatives, somewhat right of center, moderate, whatever, everybody piled on to Team Milei, and away they go. I hope that the American right, for the people that don't like Trump, have reservations about Trump, whatever, realize that the reform that our country needs, look, Trump might not be the perfect vessel. We're electing a president, not a messiah. But we need that to do a shock to the system because we are $32 trillion in debt. Our costs for just debt payments now exceed that of the defense budget.
Scary.
And so this we're going to start to circle the drain quickly unless there's some reality brought to bear.
But this
but he's so right. We cutting federal spending is not only desirable, but it is absolutely necessary. And most Republicans have been fine going downhill on one ski instead of on two skis, but we've still been going downhill. Republicans in charge of appropriations, there's no reason federal agencies have to be appropriated at anywhere near the levels. It's time to have serious cuts across the board in all government. I'm not saying cut social spending but keep defense. No, we should cut everything. There is plenty of room. There is so much fat throughout the entire federal government, from discretionary to non-discretionary to defense. Cut it all. Put it all on a diet.
Well,
I hope Milei shines the light of how to do that in Argentina.
Right. That's where I see the opportunity for us in the United States was his election. And hopefully watching from the sidelines at his success as he moves along and shows you can change a society. We are not, by the way, Argentina. Our economy is nowhere near as bad as Argentina, right? It's no comparison. If you can achieve it in Argentina, you can do it anywhere.
It's
right?
not as
not
bad
yet.
But it is necessary, and look. You can be sure that the deep state, permanent elite bureaucrats and apparatchiks surrounding it will be out to screw them every way they can, starting nonsense investigations, creating controversy where there are none, because they're fighting to protect their golden nest.
But that's the flip. If you think about it, that's the flip of what we're talking about. We're talking about the U.S. right, hopefully being able to learn something from Milei. But the deep state in Argentina sure as heck may have learned something from the deep state in the United States already, and how they can trip him up.
I'm sure they're sharpening their knives to stab him in the back.
Exactly.
But it's a fantastic win that he took the election by 12 points. That's a significant mandate.
Well, that's a movement candidate. He is a movement
and the
candidate.
thing he did best with was young people. So amazing. You can actually reach the young that are frustrated, that have no opportunity for job growth or to pay off their college loans or to buy a house. You can reach them to say, there is a better way. Follow me, choose liberty, choose freedom, and let's get on with it.
Well, if you don't take the youth for granted and you inform them, you give them the information they need, so they recognize, look, this economic crisis is more yours than it is ours, because you're going to be living with it a lot longer than the older generations, which is why I'm hopeful that it appears in polling in the U.S. presidential election right now that the youth are seeing that in the U.S. They're shifting in the direction of the right.
Especially when they can't afford to buy a house, they can't afford to do many of the basic
Their
things.
rent has shot up dramatically.
Doubled, tripled, sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's no cost of living increase for them. Most of them, living off the wages that they live off of.
Especially having gone to school and gotten a bogus degree and overpaid for it at a not effective college.
So if Milei is successful, hope to God that he is highly successful and that he is not tripped up by their deep state. Tell me what that means for South America and for the region. You've got
It means
insidious influence from Iran and China and Russia.
But if you actually have an election in Venezuela in the fall of 2024, and someone like Maria Corina Machado wins, then she has an even bigger pile of shit to clean up in Venezuela, but necessary to undo those problems. Mexico, you have AMLO is the very socialist president now, who's been, hugs, not bullets, his approach to cartel violence, and cartel violence is skyrocketed. Massive drug trafficking, fentanyl, and other hard drugs, on top of human trafficking by the millions. His appointed successor to run for president after him is even worse and even farther to the left than he is. In running, it'll be a miracle, but he's going to run. The guy that was the producer director of the movie The Sound of Freedom,
Right.
is going to run against that
In Mexico, he's running now. He was with Milei, and they signed a document agreeing that they would both fight human trafficking.
Yes. Yeah. So Mexico, our biggest trading partner, our southern neighbor, is in dangerous position because they're well on their way to becoming a full-on narco state controlled by cartel families that have far more influence and control over the police and military than even the government does.
Let's exit with this. Tell me why Milei, he's not taken office yet. He'll take office December 9th. But between his election and his taking office, he's stopping in New York.
Yeah.
On his way to Israel. Why is that significant?
He was raised kind of a nominal Catholic, but he had a lot of spiritual influence under a rabbi in New York, and he wanted to go and pray at the place that he studied in, and he's going to Israel as a sign of respect to Israel and the problems they're facing.
I mean, he's not even in office yet, and he's showing, himself as a world leader.
Yes, but yet Biden didn't have time to meet with him when he passed through Washington. So, but an interesting thing is you think about...
Yeah, but Trump had time to call him and congratulate him.
Yes, for sure he did. You think about a country like El Salvador, which was overrun with gang violence, okay, one of the murder capitals of the world, and they elected a guy named Bukele. What's his background? He's a Palestinian. And he is locked down. It is now, El Salvador is safer than Prince William County, just south of Washington, D.C., okay? That's how safe it is. He took it from the murder capital of the world, and he made it safe. Why? Because they locked down MS-13. They went after anybody showing the gang tattoos, and
he shows it can be done. It's not an intractable problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
He built a big prison to house them that's literally it's like right next to an active volcano.
That is the message from Milei, is hope, right?
Yeah.
It can be
Hope.
done.
And it made me think maybe Bukele could run Gaza.
Yeah. That's a hell of an idea. Yeah, transplant him over there. Let's get Hamas eliminated, and then get a proper ruling regime in there. Look,
leadership matters.
Leadership, yeah.
People willing to
straight.
take hard decisions and get after it matters. We're long past due in America for mealy-mouthed, weak, beta people.
And being a comms guy, I would say visual messaging matters a lot. You take a chainsaw to a political rally, count me in.
Indeed.
Amazing. Look, this has been amazing analysis on South America. There's a lot going on. We're going to continue to study it and analyze it with our resident expert, Eric Prince. For now, we are off leash. Thanks again for joining us.